country tonight, and thank you so much for joining us for, I think this is the 6th iteration of the Angus Essentials webinar. So a huge welcome to some of the faces we've seen before and to the newcomers. Yeah, we're just so pleased that you guys can join us tonight. So thank you very much. It is my great pleasure tonight to be joined by Di Wood. Di is the Media and Communications Manager at Angus Australia, so heads up the department that churns out all those magnificent catalogues that you see, as well as the Angus Bulletin and all of the things that, all the communications that you receive from Angus Australia are mostly Di and her team's work. So welcome, Di. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Jen. It's my pleasure.
Di is also running next month's Angus Essentials, which we'll talk about here in a minute. My name's Jen Peart. I'm the Northern Development Officer for Angus Australia, based up in Queensland, and I feel a part of the two-man extension team at the moment, so Jake Phillips and myself. So we're sort of your go-to people if you have any questions around anything to do with Angus, really. We're your sort of first touch point. Jake is based down in South Australia and sadly can't join us tonight. I know that he was very keen to do so. So without further ado, we'll get into our agenda for tonight. We've got just the best lineup of some of the most practical, knowledgeable people you can imagine for you. And tonight's session is really around running a successful AI program. I know spring has sprung here in Central Queensland, and I can imagine that that's probably the case across most of where you guys are tuning in from. And we've got calves hitting the ground, and I know plenty of people are starting their AI programs or starting to think about joining. So this is a really poignant topic to be discussing tonight. So the Angus Essentials webinar series has been, it's over a couple of months now. As I said, this is the 6th iteration. We've sort of covered all the touch points that you have with Angus Australia, ranging from how to register through to how to understand TACE and all of the tools that you have online that Angus Australia offers its members. And so it's really targeted at those members who are new, people who are interested in buying Angus bulls or breeding them, and just general industry knowledge. And that's sort of where we are tonight, looking at how to run a successful AI program. As I mentioned before, Di is running, well, it's not next month, it's actually the 29th of September, isn't it, Di? A sale preparation. So looking at, you know, how to prepare for your sale coming up, what interactions you should be having with Angus Australia, when that is, and just the resources that are available to you leading up to that. So that'll be really great. So if you're around on the 29th of September, the registration links are up on the Angus Australia website. So dive on in there. So without further ado, we're going to get straight into the program tonight, and we're fortunate enough to be joined by Enoch Bergman. He likes to be called Dr. Bergman, and he is a vet based down in Esperance with Swans Veterinary. He has worn so many hats. He's an American originally. We won't hold that against him, but has come out and just his passion and enthusiasm is just completely unbridled, and you guys are in for a real treat. He is knowledgeable and it's just fantastic to be around. He's done a lot about breeding better breeders, and he has run a PDS. So a PDS, as Enoch will describe, is a producer demonstration site, which is funding available through MLA. And so he'll take you through the findings of whether there's benefits to running a fixed time AI program. And also Enoch has done a lot of fixed time AI programs. So he has some tips and tricks that he has recommended. If you have any questions, so there'll be time for questions afterwards if Enoch is available. He's also on the road at the moment, so he may be around, but we'll plan to have a discussion session at the very end. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat, pop them in the Q&A section, or if you like, there's like a little raise hand function to do with Zoom that you can do. Yeah, just keep them coming, and we'll pause to take questions if Enoch's available. Otherwise, we'll chuck them in there and we'll get to them at the end. So without further ado, we'll hand over to Enoch.
Howdy, folks. Thanks a lot, Jen. That was awesome. Yeah, you said very nice things about me. I'll try to make sure some of them come true. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in. As I understand, a lot of you guys are new to the Angus Australia, and all I got to say is congratulations on joining one of the most progressive breeds in the world. Let's move forward and talk about some cool stuff that we've done over here in Esperance. I've given a lot of talks over the year on building a better cow. So I'm going to talk to you about a producer demonstration site that we ran through a producer group down here, A-Sheep, through Meat and Livestock Australia. Producer demonstration sites are freaking amazing. If you are part of a producer group and you've got something that you're doing that you want to share with others around Australia, chasing up Meat and Livestock Australia and getting into their PDS program. They have calls for submissions, I think every year, every 2 years. Get into it. It is awesome. And it really has been fantastic for our group down here. So for this PDS, we had a few people that tipped in. So there's A-Sheep, Meat and Livestock Australia, Vetakino helped us out with product, ABS helped us out with some semen, and Richard White as well. The goal of this project was pretty simple. We essentially hijacked half the heifers on a number of properties and then tracked them all the way through. So conception rate, calving, dystocia, heifer loss, calf loss, weaning weights, and rebreeding rates, and then crunched some numbers. About 2,500 heifers enrolled on 15 different sites. Pretty cool. And the goal was to encourage the uptake of fixed-time AI in commercial heifer mating programs. And so we needed to estimate the cost, or try to estimate the cost of integrating fixed-time AI versus natural mating, and then capture those differences and work out a return on investment of integrating fixed-time AI, that we could, or a cost that we could then go back and say, was that worthwhile of the genetic progress? Thank you, Vetakino, for your help. They make Q-mates. That's what I mostly use myself. And thank you, ABS, for providing these sires, and Richard White for Airedale General. Part of it was comparing the EBVs of some of the AI sires versus some natural mated sires from some of the groups. We pulled those together and we graphed it. As you can see here, as you would expect, when you purchase an AI sire, you've got a higher accuracy generally. The sire's been used more. So if you look on breed plan of Trans-Tas, you'll find the accuracy beneath all those indexes, and it tells you how likely that is to be accurate. So it's an estimate initially based on the mid-parent value, and then genomics improves it further, and then having progeny and having their genomics and then increases the accuracy over time. But you'll also notice that these sires that we chose are pretty awesome in most respects. Especially we were focusing on calving ease. As you can see that calving ease direct, indirect, short GL, and lower birth weight. Then in growth, we were also chasing more growth, 200, 400, 600 day weight than the average of what people had chosen. And they're good bulls that they'd chosen to put over their heifers. They're appropriate bulls. But these sires that we use from AI are often exceptional comparatively. And then I often try to keep an eye on mature cow weight. So we try to keep that mature cow weight a bit moderate. And that's another talk we can talk about another day. Just running through bull mating costs. We don't have much time here, so I'm going to zip through this slide really quickly. We're looking at Beef Central's 2017 average for sale bulls in 2017 was 7,600. Recently, it's been over 14 grand for the average Angus bull. So welcome to the party, Angus breeders. If you look at the cost of a bull, you got his purchase price minus his cull price, divided by his running cost, divided by the number of cows that he covers. So if we said at 3%, anyway, it works out to the bull's cost of $100 per calf produced. Part of the study, the PDS, we compared the mating weights of the animals, and as we expected, if they were light, we had a poor conception rate. Interestingly, if they were quite heavy, we had a lower than expected conception rate. I think that's because the really heavy girls were often obese, and it interfered with some of the pharmacologicals that we used pharmaceuticals that we used to run the fixed-time AI program. But yeah, as you can see, once we got up to about 300 kilos, they were statistically the same. But obviously, you want to get them to a certain weight. We only had 50% in those that were between 250 to 275 kilos. Here's a comparison of the Preg rates. Here's the collected data. And if you look down there on the average site had a 3.1% improvement in conception rate in those that were AI'd and backed up for 6 weeks versus those that ran with the bull for 7 weeks. And so what we did is we AI'd half of them on the mating start date. The other half went to the bull. 10 days later, we boxed them, and they stayed together for the rest of the study. And so we were able to improve the conception rate by 3.1 on the average farm, or around 1% in the total data set combined. So we take that and retrospectively look at the cost of mating, and then we look at the actual cost of every bull that was AI'd. So if you look down here on the syndicate mated A group, these guys had about 400 heifers. It would require 12 bulls to do the job. We've got our maths we had before. This was their conception rate. We could then take that back to a value per calf produced. Up top, because we integrated AI, we were able to reduce their bull fraction from a 3% bull coverage to 2%. So 1 to 50. And then we've got our actual fixed-time AI integration cost. So for that particular producer, it cost them $53.40 for semen, drugs, me to stand behind them, and travel to get to them. And then the cost difference there, which was $18 per calf. in the whole for using AI versus bulls. And that varied from producer to producer. The second producer, like number B there, because he only needed one bull regardless of whether or not he AI'd, he got a $60 difference. And small producers like that, typically with heifers, I advocate that they just do one round of AI and that's it. So let's play some ball here. So here we are. The average cost of integrating fixed time AI versus running bulls was $23 extra per calf. So we're $23 behind the 8 ball. But don't forget, you guys work for a living. You can't just underestimate what your time's worth. So we asked the producers how long it would take you to synchronize and run them through and stand around while AI item. And we worked out it was about 140 man hours, including mustering per 100 cows enrolled in fixed time AI. So we said, what's your time worth? I said $30 an hour. It's pretty cheap. Regardless, that came out to $14.50 per pregnancy. So that means we're behind by $37. Pretty simple. Then we did our preg testing. Again, we got you've seen this slide before. We'll run with the combined average of 0.8%. So we'll always err on the side of caution on our statistical analysis. And so if you look there, the total data set, we're down 0.8%. So we said to the producers, well, what's that worth to you? Now, later on, I'll talk about how I don't want to get all my heifers pregnant. And so I tend to, with my local producers, try to emphasize that a heifer that gets pregnant is important, but we don't want them all to get pregnant. If you hang too much value on that animal getting pregnant, you're going to spend way too long and way too much time and energy trying to get her pregnant. Let the AI program or the bull mating program or both do the job of choosing your replacement females. So there's not a big cost in an empty heifer. She can be diagnosed early. She can be sold into a different value chain. So we said $100. So anyway, that's 80 cents. Hey, we're on the board. We got $1. We got a long way to claw our way back at $36. We measured dystocia between the different properties. We had some properties that got absolutely handed to them with calving trouble, and we had some that hardly had any trouble at all. But when we averaged the total statistics, we halved the level of dystocia on the average farm, and overall we reduced the dystocia by 1.6% or a 21% reduction in total dystocia. And between the girls that were AI'd and backed up, so they still had natural mating, versus those that just went to the bull. Pretty cool, eh? That's rad. So he said to the producer, hey, what's that worth to you? And I said, well, we've got to get a vet out. It's going to cost a bit, or we got to muster the animal, pay our employees to manage that calving issue. So it was $3 distributed over the population with an incidence of 1.6%. So now we got $4 versus $37. Right out, calf mortality. Well, we were able to reduce calf mortality on the average farm by 60%. And in the combined data set, we have the amount of calves that died. So more calves died in the ones that were strictly naturally mated versus those that were AI'd and then backed up with bulls. So 2.7% reduction. So again, we say, rightio, 2.7, what's that worth to you? And we decided a calf that died at birth was $500 difference. This is Pimp. He's my own son, or my own bull, I should say. 17 days early, short GL, unbelievably low birth weight. Went in Angus our benchmarking a couple of years ago. What a cracking bull. That's a Noranda Pimp. So now we're $18 versus $37. Rightio. What about heifer mortality? Well, we didn't get much heifer mortality, but in the naturally mates, we had 2.6% of the heifers on average per farm die during calving. In the total data set, it was 1.3%. So that's a 94% reduction in dystocia on the average farm, or a 73.7% reduction in the entire data set. So pretty significant when you look at the percentage. When it's significant, you go, wow. But again, it's pretty low numbers. But again, 0.95%. So we said to our producers, what is the heifer that dies at calving worth to you? And at that time, when heifers Preg testing calf were worth about $1,700 $1,700, plus you got to hang on to her until she calves, we said that's probably worth a couple grand. In today's market, that's more like $3.5. So we said $2 grand, 0.95%. That's a $19 cost distributed over the population. Well, lo and behold, hell, we broke even. Well, there you go. And we haven't even factored in genetic improvement. But wait, there's more. Stay tuned. Now, this is the cool part, right? So we mapped the distribution of when the calves hit. So if you look at that blue graph, the peak of that is the -8 is the average calving date for the girls that were in the AI program that conceived to AI. So see that bell curve distribution, and you can see the expected calving date there, according to Dr. Google, of 283 days. And then there's the bull mates, which are the orange, as you can imagine. They 5% came on per day for 21 days. And 3% fell pregnant on average per day for 21 days. So you get that, what you get is kind of a plateau with a slope on either side. And so that's what you see, like a flattened bell curve. And then the cows, and then the next 21 days, you'd expect to get 24%, so 1% per day in natural mating. But in the AI group, we got this big spike of, about 50, 60% of the calves. And then day 21, down there, you see another little bell curve and then another one out at day 42. That is super cool, isn't it? Righto. So if we crunch those numbers, the average calf born from the AI group and backed up calved on day 2.65 of the calving season. So on average, the average calf born out of the fixed time AI integrated group calved before day 3 of the calving season. And in the syndicate mated group, it was day 11. Pretty cool. Well, why is that? Well, part of it's that GL, gestation length. We were choosing bulls with exceptionally short gestation length. And if you look at the Angus breed plan, we brought the Angus breed back by 4.4 days over the last 20-some years. It's pretty amazing. We also selected for growth, right? So let's look at some cool stuff here. Weaning weights. Well, these calves were born early, on average 8 days, like we just showed you. But we used sires that had higher 200-day weights. So when we look at the sires, bang, in every group where we were able to weigh calves, the calves were significantly heavier in the groups that were enrolled in the fixed time AI program, to the tune of 15 kilos. That's cool. Why is it cool? Well, because 15 kilos back then equaled $4 per kilo, equals $60. Nowadays, it equals a little bit more, doesn't it? So we're probably talking more like 60 bucks. Regardless, back then, bang, 97 to 37 bucks. We're in the money, we're in front, but there's more, So this is pretty rad too. Look at this, it's called a survival curve. So the girls started calving in the AI group 22 days before the calving date. And by the calving due date, 283 days, Dr. Google, 63.8% of the heifers had already calved within the groups that were enrolled in the fixed time AI program, versus only 21.6% of the girls in the naturally mated group. Why is that important? Well, if an animal calves early, especially as a heifer, she's more likely to be cycling when the bull goes back in, which means she's more likely to get back and calf. And that's what we saw in the data. If you look at this rebreeding success, which is freaking cool, we were able to, on the average farm, increase the conception rate in the first calvers, which typically struggle, and most people that mate their heifers the same time as their cows, which is a no-no. Coming to my other talks, mate your heifers early, mate them short. But anyway, if you're mating the same time as your cows, you'll always have a bit of a slump in your first calvers after they have that first calf. We were able to get a conception rate of 90.4% in the fixed time AI integrated group, that's the AI plus backups, versus a conception rate of 85.8% in the naturally mates. So an improvement of 4.5% on the average farm, or in the combined data set, an improvement of 2.7%, reducing the number of empties by 21.4%. That's cool, ain't it? It is cool. I love it. I love this stuff. Cool. So we said to the producers, well, what's that work? Now, my clients, I really educate them that the key is to get a girl to calve early as a 3-year-old, having already weaned a healthy calf as a 2-year-old, right? So my guys really see the value or the expense in losing an animal after it has its first calf. I mean, that's a real bummer. She's raised a heifer that's raised you a calf and then doesn't get back in calf, and now she's left the party with, she's just starting to get her dentition happening. She's got her whole life in front of her. Now she's empty and she's going to end up in a Mrs. Max. That is a tragedy. So we said $1,000. Arguably, that's more in today's dates. So that's the 2.7% difference. That's another $27. So now, boom, $124 in front with $37 cost. So $87 in the black. That's badass. We haven't even talked about genetic improvement. We haven't even mentioned it. Well, we have mentioned it, but anyway, that's cool, isn't it? Super rad. But wait, there's more. No time to explain. Get in the car. Let me explain. This is rad. Why is this so cool? Let me tell you about my normal talk, which is building a better cow. The perfect new beef cow calves as a 3-year-old, already having weaned one calf. How do we get there? Well, you look after them when they're little, right? Cows on average take about 55 days after the calf to get their shit together. Heifers, on the other hand, take another 20 to 30 days. So they could take up to 85 days. Now they're pregnant for about 280, 279 in the Angus breed, thanks to breed plan. We brought it forward 4 days from 283. 280 plus 85 is 365. That number sounds familiar for a reason. So if you join your heifers the same time as your cows, the heifers that calve on day 1 of the calving season, the same as the cows, will on average just be starting to cycle when the bull's going the next year. And that's bad. We want them all cycling when the bull goes in. So by bringing them forward, the more we can bring them forward, the more likely they are to get back in calf. And here's some really cool stuff, which is coming up here in a minute. How can we fix this? Well, we can, if we had 13 months in a year, if we could slow the rate that the earth goes around the sun, we wouldn't even need a preg test probably. We'd have exceptional conception rates. Can we shorten the gestation? Well, look, we are with breed plan already, -4 days. How far can we go? We don't know. I've got a bull that I own that's -15.2 for GL. Wow, man, before long, I'll be AI and I'll have to get out of the crush in a hurry. Other things can calve on me. Could we calve 1 month later each year? Yes, but then you're gonna get out of sync with your feed. But we can with the heifers, right? We can join those heifers early. With AI, we can even bring it even closer. That's the dream. That's just checking how much time I've got. We're going okay, team. We still got time. Hopefully you're listening fast because I'm talking fast. All right, so an early and short heifer joining is an early and short heifer calving, and it just gives them extra time to get back in calf, buying more time to get back in calf. Now here's the awesome stuff. This is Cushman. So in the US, they ran this big study up at Miles City, Montana. They had a cow herd, and they were trying to work out whether twinning is heritable. And they had all the data from these girls from all the way back in, say, 2001 or whenever it was. And they tracked them through their entire life, and they kept track of every calf they produced and whether or not they got pregnant. So in the first year, they categorized them into 3 groups. Now look at that far to the left. Did you calve in the first 21 days? Did you calve in the second 21 days? Or did you calve in the last 21 days? And you're either a blue ribbon, a red ribbon, or gold, silver, bronze. You dig what I'm saying? And that's what you were for the rest of your life. So if those girls on the left that are 100% as first calvers, or as heifers, they've calved in the first 21 days. So the next year, what happened? Well, the next year, when the second conception, they had a 93.5% conception rate. But those girls that calved in the second 21 days, they only had an 87.5% conception rate. And the girls that calved in the last 21 days, those poor girls only had about a 83% conception rate. And what I say to my clients is, I don't even want those girls to be on the farm in the first place. I want to shorten my heifer joining. That gray bar there, I don't even want them on my farm, because they are going to cost me for the rest of their life if they happen to stay in the herd. And a lot of them are going to be empty the next year. Because here's the rad thing. Those blue ribbons up there at the front, the girls that calved in the first 21 days, it isn't until about the 6th or 7th year that they start to catch up with the ones that calved in the second to last 21 days. And the only reason those second to last 21 days are catching up is because more of them are disappearing from the system. If you look at the survival curve, it was 100% of all of them on the first year, the first 21 days, second 21 days, third 21 days. And in the second year, we've lost 7% of the girls in the first 21 days. We've lost 13% of the ones in the second 21 days. We've lost 17% of the girls in the last 21 days. And over time, when you go out to ninth conception later, only 40% of those girls that calved in the last 21 days are still there, versus about 60% of the ones that calved in the first 21 days. So the point of it is, this pays dividends. And why does it pay dividends? Because calving early also equates to a heavier calf. So if you look at the calves in the first year, they were significantly heavier. And it wasn't until the year 6 that there was no longer a statistical difference between the girls that calved in the first 21 days as a heifer from the ones that calved in the last 21 days as a heifer. And the cool thing in this data set, according to Cushman, is the animals that were still there 9 years later, the girls that calved in the first 21 days versus the ones in the last 21 days, in their lifetime, calved in a whole additional calf in weaning weight. Kilograms of beef per hectare, baby, get it done. It's awesome. So early and short joining, great tool. Make sure you're doing it. So I got some slogans for you for it. Join more heifers, let love pick your replacements. Not bad. Your best heifers are your pregnant heifers. Obviously, heck, I don't care what they look like, as long as their pregnancy is more important. There's no tragedy in an empty heifer. They can always go to the sale yard. You can grass finish them. They can go into a feedlot for short days, long fed, they'll be away. 3 to 4 week mating. I got lots of guys that do 2 rounds of AI. I got some guys that just do 1 round of AI, and that's all they get. Some guys do 1 round, back them up to 2%, maybe sell the lates. Most importantly, don't get married to your heifers. If you're trying to get all your heifers pregnant, you are already going into this heifer mating program with the wrong idea in mind. The ones that fall pregnant are the ones that you want to keep, at least in a commercial setting. I mean, if you got, paratrooper with boobs with an udder, you probably might want to make sure she gets pregnant. But generally speaking, I want the AI program to pick them out. I mean, honestly, trying to pick out your heifers when they're 9 to 10 months old and claiming that you picked the very best of them, unless you got breed plan figures to work with, is a little bit like me when I was on the same age as this fellow, Macaulay Culkin. And I thought, I want to be like him when I grow up. And I'm over here in Australia. I've got about 1,000 cows, and I've got a veterinary clinic, and I've got 4 beautiful children. And he's a heroin addict, so I would have missed it. I would have missed it. I think I'm doing okay. I'm glad to be me and not Macaulay Culkin. But I'm sure he's still a hell of a nice guy. And the other comment is look to the dam. When it comes to a heifer, don't look at her to work out whether she's good. Look to her mother. This is what my dad told me when I went to college. He said, "Son, you're going to meet a lot of girls up there in college." Only 2 girls in my high school class in the town of Wilders, Colorado, which is only 12 people at the time. So I went to uni, and boy, there were a lot of people, and a lot of them were girls. And everyone I met, if I started talking to them and they kind of liked me a little bit, I'd work into the conversation. So what does your mother look like? That's one hell of a way to absolutely sink negotiations. I always look to the dam. Someone said to me, "Do you want to go out with Elle McPherson?" Elle McPherson's daughter. I'm going to go, hell yes, because she's got great feet. Sadly, she's just got boys, but she's 50 years old at that stage, and get good looking bulls too. ABS has plenty. Look at these 2. I mean, they were pretty innocuous. You got a red Angus and a blonde Aquitaine. You wouldn't have expected anything was going to go awry. What about this cute little fella? Low birth weight, good calving ease. Yeah, big mature cow weight, 20,000 day weight's blown off the rector. top 1% for 20,000 day weight. I think he's even got a small scrotal circumference. I'm not sure. We'll find out. But lastly, get back into the PDSs. PDSs are awesome. If you don't have a producer group, make one so you can get a PDS going. They are just awesome. Here's the work from our guys. The producers went in pretty much, the guys that went into this program didn't want AI. They only came into it because of the PDS, and they had a fairly neutral view of the advantages of integrating fixed time AI. But after the trial, so the reds before and the blues after, do they think it helped? It was nuts. It's pretty cool. Worked out well in field days with extension. And yeah, just fantastic. So you got your cows there. Remember, they work for you. They're your employee, and your best employees have early and improve your genetics. What do you see here? Beautiful heifer. What do I see here? An animal that needs AI. What do you see here? That's my dog. Yeah, just my dog. I don't know what you saw. Love the heat. Get in the kitchen. You doggy. This is on the morning of an AI program. This is the heat rolling off of, and that's what they call it, heat. All right, so now let's talk about players. I've still got lovely Jen is. These are things that I've learned over the years on integrating fixed time AI and some of the issues that I ran into. So you're going to have a bat. You want to get some runs on the board, right? So you want to optimize your success. If you haven't done it before and you know someone who has, have them come out and help you put in devices, give injections, work with your technician and use the program that they want. We got Bose Sync, J Sync, Co Sync, Kitchen Sync. Don't worry so much about the program. Let your technician pick the program. They'll use what they're comfortable with. Go with their experience. If you know someone who does a lot of droughties and they said, oh, look, I can do some Angus for you, you might want to search a bit more information or vice versa. But generally speaking, go with what people are comfortable with. So tips for the new players, got a few for you. Good cow selection is key. Give them a good look. We used to, what this image is about is in Africa, they worked out if you blow into, push air and create positive pressure inside the vagina of the cow, it stimulates milk letdown. And many of us have seen those pictures of the guys blowing, and it's kind of humorous. But yeah, that's what that's about. Are they cycling is important. So key, they got to be the right size. Remember that graph I showed you before? And they need to be on a rising plane of nutrition. This is at Lake Ballard in Western Australia. With my little boys, we went down there and went walking around checking out these cool statues in this art installation. Make sure they aren't pregnant. This is my wife before we had kids. That absolute train wreck when you rock up to a job and it turns out that they're already pregnant. So if you're AIing heifers, just make sure that they aren't pregnant. If you got a big program, you invest a lot of time and energy into it, go through and check them. I know I've rocked up to programs where we've had 60, 70, 80% of them already pregnant when we arrived there, and everyone's just disappointed. And that's something that could be managed proactively. Just so they aren't pregnant, because you can be surprised. Blam, blam. Communication, whoever your service provider is, I guess it's the sort of stuff we send out. And just make sure you got clear communication on timings. Timing is critical. It's not like one of those, oh, it's in the morning, she'll be right, mate. With fixed time AI, it's very critical. We're trying to take all these little eggs and we're trying and all these different cows, and we're trying to kind of corral them into a narrow window to ovulate in a relatively succinct window. When you're putting the devices in, keep it clean. The device, a Kenol device is actually a sticker on the handle that you can scrape the vulva with. When you introduce it, go a little bit vertical. The urethra lies on the bottom of the floor of the vagina and it'll catch. Heifers sometimes have a little bit of a hymen, so a little bit of gentle pressure. If you think she might be a free martin, have a feel of her udder. I'll use like an easy bossy type introducer to check to make sure they're not a free martin. Free martins have very short vaginas and no cervix, and you don't want to force something into a free martin. Right products, right doses, right time. I give out these flexi tubes, makes it real easy. So you're not, a lot of these hormones, you've only got enough for the job. And if you break a bottle, it's bad. So use these bottle mounted vaccinator guns, keep them vertical and push it through a tube with an 1.5 inch long needle. You want to go neatly into the muscle. Here we are pushing up a couple of my girls to do. Love scratchies. Why do I love scratchies? Because they're so easy to put on, they're so easy to use. And when I show up and I see something like this is a program I did up on a station, I know in advance that I'm going to have trouble. There's a lot of gray in that picture. And so I can forecast that we're kind of pushing the proverbial uphill. So yeah, scratchies are grand. And you can put them in the right spot. You can cut them in half. I got a mate, Harry Lawson, 100% AI, does a great job, but he cuts them into thirds, 100% AI on his budget. He's like, well, we're AI in 8,000 this year. So obviously he's reducing his Estrotech sticker bill a little bit. So you can cut them and heat them up, put them in a hot, I take skillet, or just boil some water, put it in a little Coke bottle, stick it inside an esky, and when they're warm, they stick a lot better, even if it's raining. These things are amazing. All right, let's talk about tanks. If you're storing semen, this is my big tank that I store stuff in. I've got locations top and bottom with different straws with the description on each location. Within your tank, you've got single or double stack lifters. Double stacks are great for storage. Single stacks are amazing for actually working, pulling straws up if you're actually AIing. Lots of ways to keep within a same goblet. You can keep a whole host of different things. You know, you've got goblets, markers, and straw color. So, you know, you don't want to put two sets of straws in there that have a white goblet with white straws, so you don't inadvertently when you go out on a job take the wrong product. This is my USB tank. It's a little single stack, and I just stick my what I do is I put a single sire generally around the edges there. My tanks that live here, I check them weekly, and we've got a Excel spreadsheet so we can monitor the rate if there's an acceleration in which the liquid nitrogen is evaporating. Don't hurt yourself before your AI season. That was me right before an AI season. I had to get a mate into AI for me. And here's something cool. It's colder than hell down in that liquid nitrogen, but when you get up into the neck of that flask, it starts warming up a lot. And you go, oh, geez, it's still minus 40 in there, right in the middle. But that's actually pretty bloody warm for that semen. What kills semen is warming up and then being plunged back into that liquid nitrogen. That's the most dangerous thing for that semen that you're storing, is to thaw it and freeze it again. You just don't want that to happen. So you want to really manage that closely. So you see folks that are new to AI, and when they're pulling a straw, they're doing this, and see how there's frost all over the necks of those straws? That tells you that the humidity of the outside atmosphere is sticking to those straws. You're lifting it too high. Keep it down in the goblet. Try not to use your fingers because there's oils on your fingers. Use your tweezers. And that's a little bit high there. Even I like reach down into the goblet and pull it up out of there. I only keep it up for 3 or 4 seconds and then back down again. If I'm having trouble with the straw, like I can't get it out because it's a bit tight in the goblet, and I'm having trouble, I'll just put it back and let it cool down again and bring it up. I'm really, really anal about this. This is a 1%er job. 1% plus 1% plus 1% plus 1% plus 1% is 5%. Quick to the bath cave. So from when I get it out there, at least the way I was taught, I've got 3 or 4 seconds to get it into the hot water bath. So plunge it into my hot water bath. Don't cook your swimmers sitting in the hot tub. Snow bingo. I've got ABS makes these lovely cards. Other manufacturers make them as well that give you a quick estimate. I've also got a device there that measures the temperature to make sure everything's hunky-dory. Once they're in the bath, you got about 40 seconds you need a minimum of 40 seconds, 45 seconds, and then they can be in there for up to 15 minutes. I try to cycle them through. I'll thaw, depending on my person who's thawing. If they're new to the game, I'll get them to thaw 4 or 5 at a time until they get comfortable. Then I'll get down to 3 at a time. So I'll thaw 3 in a row. We see what's coming down the race, so we can prognosticate what's coming. We'll write the ID of the cow and then the ID of the semen that is given to the person thawing the semen, and then when they pull the straw out, they'll dry it, read the straw, look at the writing on the piece of paper, dry it, load it into the gun, and then wrap it with that same piece of paper. So when I'm handed that gun, I'm looking at that piece of paper, which I used to wipe the vulva, and I'm looking at the ID of that cow that's written on it and confirming the straw. Don't rub the straw vigorously because it'll explode. Man, there's a good joke there, but I'm not going to go there. I just kind of, like a taco, just kind of roll it. If you can create a bit more heat, you don't want to do that. Cut your straw nice and flat. These little cutters on the left are great. If you're doing something like ET, it's probably a good idea to in between each animal cut on the paper to clean the scissors. You can have a little bit of semen left on those scissors. It's a very, very unlikely instance that you're going to have the last bull's semen go in there, but it can happen. Here's some work done on the temperature of the bath and the effect on motility. So the top one there is your 37 degrees, and it's the percentage still motile is far better than if it was too hot or too cold. Keeping them warm and clean. A lot of people put them down their shirt. A mate of mine, he likes putting a rectal sleeve down the shirt as well, just to keep them from getting the oils from the body contacting it. They make quivers. They're nice. I reckon I might invest in one, but what I traditionally do is I've got a hot box, and inside the hot box is a little hot water bottle, and I normally have that at the front of the box, so that and it's covered in a towel, and it just keeps that box warm. And I've got a thermometer in there that makes sure it's not getting excessively warm in there. And it keeps my guns warm when I'm AIing when it's cool. But I reckon invest in a quiver. I reckon they're good. Got to be clean to pass the genes. Give them a bit of a wipe. 101 uses for vet students. This good friend of mine, he's a vet student here. He's got fanny spreader on his resume now, and then just measure everything you do and capture that data so that you can continue to adapt, crunch those numbers, work out, you know, I gave GnRH to some of the animals, what did it improve the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. And then just keep breeding. Here's my oldest. Here's my second oldest, keep on breeding. Finally got myself a heifer. Yep, we're going good. And lo and behold, even got myself an Angus. Thank you for your attention. Things I always say to folks, join more heifers. If you want to get pregnant, join them short and early. Preg test as early as you can. Get those girls gone. They're just eating grass for no reason. Calve with feed. Don't fight nature. And wean early. These were pretty cool. I think Jen uses them as well. And if my son comes home looking like that, I'm definitely going to wean him early. That's us. I've got a YouTube channel, Enoch the Cow Vet. Please tune in. Love to have you in there. And thank you, Angus Australia. What a great opportunity to spread some of the research that we had from A-Sheep and Meet Livestock Australia and the PDS program. Get into it. Get into it, my friends. Whether it be PDSs or AI in your heifers, it is time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Enoch. I don't know about you guys, but I love watching Enoch present, and I'm just a little bit disappointed that you guys don't get to see him in real life in person. I know he feels that way as well. We have just 5 minutes here for questions.
Howdy, folks. Thank you.
Sorry. For Enoch, if anyone has any. So again, pop them in the chat or raise your hand, or alternatively, you can hold them over to the end of the presentations where we'll have a bit of a discussion session. Enoch, I know that you're online now, so thank you very much for that, mate. That was fantastic.
You bet. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Angus Australia.
I've considering there were pre-recorded sessions, I've had this nice moment where Enoch opens with, "Thanks, Jen, you've said some really nice things about me," and I had all the power in the world to say some not so nice things and still be thanked for it, which was kind of cool. Di, have we had any questions?
Pineapple beans.
Yeah. Di, have we had any questions come in?
Not at this stage, Jen. It looks like everyone's either waiting till the end or too shy to put their hand up.
I've either dazzled them with brilliance or baffled them with bullshit.
We'll go with the brilliance one, Enoch. Anyway, that data is just so powerful.
You're so kind.
I don't know about that. Anyway, well, if that's the case, as I said, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. But for the moment, we'll hold them over to after the next two presenters. Yeah, Enoch, thank you so much. That data is so powerful, and the just the tips and tricks I think are so valuable. Just for, you know, how many AI programs do you reckon you're involved in a year?
I have somewhere around 8,000 or 9,000 a year, and my smallest producer might be one, and my biggest producer, I think we do 500 for one guy.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
It's
right,
awesome.
well,
Love it. It's so much fun. It's really great. I've got guys that have been doing it for 15 years. It's magic.
That's brilliant. All right. Well, we certainly appreciate you throwing your wisdom behind this and lending it to us. That's fantastic.
Thank you, gorgeous. Thank you, team.
Cool. We'll talk to you at the end, Enoch. Thank you very much. Just another reminder, guys, pop your questions through and Di will read them out on your behalf, or raise your hand as I've suggested. So moving on, we have Julie Pocock, and she is with Veterinol, and she is the Northern Territory, New South Wales and Queensland territory managers. Julie has her skin in the game. She is a seed stock producer herself. She has such an amazing career spanning like animal health, and now she's working for Repro360. So she is super boots on the ground. She's seen so much of this, and she just has so much knowledge, as does Repro360. Just so many resources for producers to take advantage of. So Julie's going to run us through how to run an AI program and just give some really practical boots on the ground advice on how to achieve the best results. And between her and Enoch, you're sort of talking to two superpowers of AI here. So I'm really excited that you're going to get A, this contact, and B, this exposure. Yeah, she has so much to offer. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Julie.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks to Angus Australia for having us on board for tonight. So I'm going to run through some practical planning and some implementation of your first AI program. So my name's Julie Pocock, as Jen said. So I'm the Territory Manager for Queensland, New South Wales and WA in the Repro360 team for Veticanol. When we think our first program, it's really important that we actually start planning. And we're really in this point now, or some of us may be past this point, depending on that first point. You need to have some clear breeding objectives for your season or seasons ahead. And it's really important to have realistic expectations of what your results are going to look like. It's important that you've identified the right females, and there's some, obviously some examples there of things that you need to be considering when you're selecting the females that are going to form part of your first AI program. Nutrition is one of the most important things. It's really important to make sure that we have those females on a rising plane of nutrition. We would like to see them at that body condition score 3 on a rise, and also not too fat. That's important. Also think about the fact that cattle need to be vaccinated, so boosters given for things like Pesty, Lepto, and then possibly considering where the Vibrio is within your herd as well, and the bulls that you're purchasing in as cover bulls. Identify the resources that you're going to need. So staff, drugs, all of those things. Have a good checklist in place so that you know that you've got everything organised. It's also a really, really busy time of the year for all of our cattle vets and AI technicians. So really, could not stress enough to get your programs booked in as soon as you can with the technician or vet of your choice if you're not experienced in doing the AI yourself, because you may miss the date that you're wanting to AI and have to compromise because these guys physically can't be in 2 places at once. A couple of months out, we start thinking about, right, now we need to make sure that we've chosen the genetics that we're going to use and organised to have it shipped or have the bulls collected if you're using your own bulls. If you're planning to do fresh AI, that's another thing to consider and have that booked in with your vet. Making sure that if it's a bull that you've bought this season, that giving him enough time to recover if there was any stresses on his morphology during the sale prep. If you can access semen that is average to low in cost, going for a straight fixed time AI program will give you the most pregnancies and give you great results. However, if you're using semen that's quite expensive or semen that might be rare, you really need to start considering if you're going to put some extra measures in place to get, the maximum results from that semen with that cost factor considered. So things like aided heat detection in your programs and scanning your females at AI to make sure that they've adequately responded to the protocol that you've selected. When we look at 1 month out, this is where it's time to finalise your protocol with the provider that you're using, and that may include some resynchronization. Make sure that you've got your key dates. The biggest mistake that I see people make is we get phone calls where they have said, well, I'm AIing on, the 11th of the month, but they don't realise that day 0 is 10 days before that. So that's probably the biggest trip up for new players in the AI space, is forgetting how long the synchronization program runs for. Set yourself some reminders if you need to. Make sure at 1 month out, this is where you need to make sure you've ordered all of your synchronization drugs. Start to organize things that you're going to need, like needles and syringes, and things like paper towel, gloves, lubricant, and disinfectant. Ensure that at month out that your semen has either arrived on farm or is in the hands of your vet or AI technician, ready to go. When you're a week out, this is a time to set up around the yards, making sure that you've got feed and water set up in or around the yards, and make sure that the holding paddocks that you're going to use around your program are secure. There is nothing more heartbreaking than getting to AI day and you find the bulls have gotten in. Ensure your synchronization hormones have arrived, and it's really important to adhere to storage instructions. Some of these hormones are quite sensitive to heat, so it's really important to keep them chilled, keep them in the fridge, and make sure you are understanding how they need to be stored. The time of AI, D-Day. This is where it's really important to make sure all of your staff are on board. They need to understand the job that needs to be done, and they also need to understand the program. If you're using heat detection, make sure you dedicate enough time to watch the females. Maintaining your cold chain on day of AI is also really important. So having eskies and ice bricks at the yards is really a good idea if you're using products like GnRH that do need to be kept chilled. Hygiene is so important. It's important when you're inserting devices, and it's also important on AI day. And make sure that you're changing needles regularly, and making sure the most important thing as well is that cattle are as calm as possible, making sure you're not restricting food or water for too long. So energy is really important and key for reproductive performance. So getting the cattle back out as quickly as possible for each treatment and on AI day is really important. So let's think about some practical tips. So this is the fun part. I get to do a lot of day zero setups, and it's really great to get out on farm and help with the education around this. So this is a really great little checklist of things that you need to have ready, so that 1 month prior when you're planning, make sure you've got these things on board. Have a copy of your program at the yards. Have a copy of your program on your drug fridge. Have a copy of your program wherever you think you might need to reference back to it to make sure that you're doing the right thing. You're going to need 3 buckets. You're going to need disinfectant, Hibitane or betadine. You're going to need your Q-mate, so your devices, and an applicator. I actually recommend having at least 3 applicators, depending on the size of the mob. If you're doing really large mobs, the more applicators you can have loaded in the bucket, ready to go, it really helps to keep the cattle flowing and getting through them quickly but efficiently. Have your injectable hormones if you need them for day 0. Just some programs you won't need injectables on day 0, some you will. So again, reference back to your program. Needles, syringes, injection guns, and slapshot tubing. Have all of those things ready to go. You're going to need some paper towel. Clean water is essential. So if you don't have that access at the yards, try to organise something. You're going to need clean water for your buckets, for your device to sit in, and to obviously clean your applicators in between animals. And you're going to need some gloves. So some other practical tips on that day 0 setup. Again, making sure that all staff have been trained to correctly handle the hormones safely. That's really important throughout the whole program. Make sure that the cattle are effectively restrained. That'll ensure their safety and the safety of your staff when they're giving these treatments. Use Q-mate applicators to clean the vulva prior to insertion. The handle on a Q-mate applicator is actually designed for this. So it helps to scrape any manure off and reduce the amount of paper towel you're going to need, but it also makes it nice and clean. Cleanliness is not negotiable when you're running an AI program. You need to take the time to make sure that you're adhering to this step really, really strictly. What we run is generally the 3 bucket rule. So you'll have 3 buckets. You'll have a dirty bucket where once the Q-mate has been inserted, you'll actually take that applicator and you'll rinse off any visible manure or mucus or anything that's on an applicator in your dirty bucket. You'll then have a second bucket that's set up with your disinfectant in it, and you can disinfect and clean that applicator thoroughly in that bucket, then using that disinfectant water before you reload with your next Q-mate and put it in your 3rd clean bucket. So again, that's a bucket with water and your disinfectant. So we generally use Hibitane, and you actually sit the applicator loaded with your Q-mate in there. And another little tip that I find is great is you either load from the left or load from the right into the bucket. And so then the applicator that you take, remembering you're going to have multiple. So the loaded applicator you take from the right. So into the left and out from the right. So that way you're always taking the Q-mate that's been sitting in the bucket the longest. Make sure that you change the water in that bucket frequently. That's going to vary depending on how much manure you're getting from the heifers or cows, how dirty they are, and things like that. So it's a little bit of how long's a piece of string, and you need to gauge that. But making sure that you're keeping the water as clean as possible, especially in that 2nd and 3rd bucket. Ensuring injections are given accurately. So estradiol, which is one of the injections, is quite thick. And so if you actually are using a slap shot and you depress the gun and pull that slap shot needle out too quickly, you actually can miss some of that dose being absorbed. So take your time, make sure that the injections are given accurately so that the full dose is delivered. Always check your doses on your program too to make sure, because sometimes heifers versus cows, if you've got a mixed mob, they'll have different doses of the same hormone. Now, while speed is on processing is important from the factor that we want to get those cattle back on feed and water as quickly as possible, accuracy and cleanliness is probably more essential as well. We need to make sure that we're keeping things clean and we're being accurate with all of our dosing. Now, treatment days in between. Again, ensuring that all injections are given correctly at the correct doses. I like to use an injection gun if their mobs are, larger mobs. Small mobs, you can get away with needles and syringes and drawing up the doses individually. But injection guns and slapshot tubing make things nice and safe. You can process the cattle really calmly because, again, stress is going to negatively impact your results. What I do like to do here on those treatment days is, where possible, if it's safe and you're able to do it, is do those treatments in the race. So load the cattle into the race, do the treatments, injections, pulling Q-mates, everything in the race, and then let those cattle flow out through the crush. What it means is that you're only catching them in the crush on day 0 setup when you're actually putting the devices in, and then on AI day. So those treatment days in between, the cattle know that the crush is out and it's a flow process. So, doing them that way, I find that it helps to, keep that stress level down, and the cattle know, and they'll flow better on AI day. Adhere to your program timings. I can't stress this enough. Those timings are set for a reason. But you know what? People make mistakes. And if you make a mistake and you give the wrong injection on the wrong day, or a wrong dose, or, you miss it and you're not sure what to do, jump on your phone immediately. Don't think it'll be okay, because sometimes it can be okay, but sometimes we can adjust things in the back half and sometimes we can't. So the earlier you realise that you've made a little mistake, and the quicker you get on the phone to your vet, your AI technician, or the Repro360 team, jump on the phone to us and we can troubleshoot your protocol and see what we can do to make sure that we're still, hopefully getting you guys a good result for all the work you've already put in. And don't restrict food and water intake for too long. Get those cattle back onto feed, water and shade as quickly as you can. Now, on AI day, this is where you hand over a lot of the control to your experienced vet or technician if you're not doing it yourself. These guys know what they're doing, so really follow their advice. But what you need to have ready is any paperwork corresponding to the joinings. Have that ready to go, know what you need to do. Make sure you know where the semen is in your tank. If you're a little unsure, give these guys a heads up so they can bring some extra nitrogen and sorting boxes. That way they can safely find semen if they need to, but ideally try and do that beforehand. Again, make sure on AI day that everybody's on board and handling the cattle as calmly and efficiently as possible. We don't want to be out there, trying to, race them up into the crush. Let's take it nice and calm and steady and get the cattle flowing without creating too much extra stress. Return those cattle to shade, food and water as quickly as you practically can. And remember, ensure that the bulls are locked away. There's nothing more heartbreaking. So for some more tips, you can actually jump onto the Repro360 website, and there's some QR codes that will take you directly to some podcasts and also some great tip videos so you can get some more information. We also have our 360 helpline. So there's the phone number and the email address there, and there's heaps of stuff on the website. And you guys are really fortunate that Angus Australia has got a great resource bank as well of things that can help you to sort through. But if you want to just talk to somebody, don't be afraid to jump on the phone to any of us. So I'll hand back over to you now, Jen, and we can answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you so much, Julie. I know that was a lot of information, but there's just so much that goes into the thought process behind, AI protocols and that sort of thing. And so Julie is such a great resource. She has done a webinar with Angus Australia. She's got their own Repro360 webinar, which is just, this sort of experience is invaluable if you're doing an AI program for the first time, or, as I said, old dogs looking for new tricks. Julie, I might kick us off with the first question is, what sort of things do you consider before recommending an AI program, like a particular AI program to somebody? Like, what are the things that you look at before making recommendations?
Yeah, Jen, no worries. You got me hearing me okay. Hopefully my internet connection, we've got a storm here as well, which is great. Look, the first things we recommend, the first things that we look at is we try to get a really good understanding of the type of cattle that you're wanting to put forward. So is it a mob of heifers? Is it a mixed mob, a mob of cows? If they're cows, how many calves that they had and things like that. We then look through
Sorry, keep going. That was my fault,
Yep.
Julie.
Then we look through body condition. Yeah, you're good, no worries. We look through, then we obviously want to get a good understanding of their nutritional background and, just a really good overview to understand the goals on farm and what type of semen you're using, all of those type of things. We want to get a good understanding before we recommend a protocol, because it certainly isn't a one size fits all. And it's something that just because, you've used a certain protocol before that, there may be something that might work better for this particular mob and the objectives. And obviously your semen in the background, if you're going to use sex semen, for example, we'll probably, recommend fine tuning your program a little bit and adding in some checks and balances in the back half with getting your timing more accurate in using that sex semen to drive as good a results as you can. So there's so many different factors, and the more information that we can get from you or your vet or technician can get from you, the better they can to recommend the right protocol for that mob. And it could be different. Our AI programs, we sometimes run a different program at home than we do on our recips, for example. So, even on the same farm, you can use different protocols for different objectives for each mob.
That's brilliant. And what sort of lead time are you recommending, Julie? I know you touched on it in your presentation, but considering this information is sort of stuff that you already know, months out, what's the lead time you recommend before contacting people like yourself or your technician?
I would give it 2 to 3 months. Yeah, 2 to 3 months out. Because if there's something that we identify with you that, especially from a nutritional point of view, and obviously the next speaker will probably be able to give you more heads up around that, but correcting nutritional deficits obviously can't always be done overnight. So giving yourself time to do that, and also looking at those health things, 2 to 3 months out, you should sort of have a really good plan as to where that mob is and what's happening. And, the weather can play a bit of a havoc at times and change things, but having those conversations that way out. And look, this season is going to be crazy. And as I said, getting the time with those vets and technicians to actually be able to physically do your programs, the sooner you get in contact with them and get things planned and sorted, the better off you're going to be this season, because the demand is going to be very high.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. And do you recommend morphology testing the straws that you're going to be using?
Yeah, looks definitely. I think if you need to understand the quality of the semen that you're going to be using, and having, that's something certainly for early on. And as I said, you'll have differences in, if you're able to identify that potentially the semen that you're wanting to use and the morphology might not be as good, then your vets and your technicians will be able to work with you on maybe putting some checks and balances in place if you really want to use those particular genetics. So ideally, anything that's frozen here in Australia that's gone through those accredited labs should be good enough quality semen to get you the results. They all have to pass a minimum. But sometimes if it's semen that you've collected yourself on farm, it may not have been quite as good, or post-thaw some semen. It's certainly something to discuss with those experienced vets in that semen space. They can assess your straws, and if you've bought it, that's another thing. If you've bought it in and it's gone through multiple hands, get the semen checked to make sure that there hasn't been any errors, and that the semen, as Enoch just said, if it gets warm and not handled correctly, that you can actually have semen that you think is okay, but due to a handling error, and it no longer is, and that can really negatively impact your results. So definitely get your semen checked. I think that's a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, awesome advice, Julie. Thank you so much. Di, do we have any questions in the Q&A?
We do have a question. We've got a question from Tim for you, Julie, and his question is, have you done any more work on just using one QMate pod for heifers?
Yep, so the QMate, that is actually on our label, so using using a single pod QMate, so where you've replaced one of the active progesterone pods with a blank pod, that's across the board for all heifers. Yes, so we do that as a standard rule. Where we would change it is if you've got crossbred heifers and really large heifers, it's just as negative an impact to have not enough progesterone as it is to have too much. And so if we've got heifers that are sort of 450, 500 kilos plus with hybrid vigor at play, then that's where we would probably have a conversation around what we think will be the correct dose for those heifers. Touching back to that, it's really important to tailor your program and have a look at the mob itself. So yes, we do recommend the single pod in most heifers, purebred heifers especially.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, we've got another question that's popped up there.
Okay.
Is there a specification for straws purchased from semen suppliers, and does it include motility and morphology?
It's probably a good Enoch question, actually. If he's still on the line, there is guidelines as to, what is acceptable. So Enoch could probably answer what those values are if he's still there.
Yeah, he's just unmuted himself.
He would know those, specific details probably better. So Enoch, if you want to jump on that one.
He's unmuted himself, Jen, but Enoch, we can't actually hear you if you are speaking. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Okay. You got me? Oh, cool. Yeah, so all licensed semen, they do a bench test to make sure that not only is the motility was acceptable, that the motility.
Enoch, I might just interrupt you. I'm so sorry. You're coming through really patchily. What we might do, because as I said,
sorry.
No, you
sorry,
go.
Jen. I think the motility, I caught a little bit of that.
One little spot graph, but maybe when we do the panel discussion, I'll answer that question.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that sounds good.
I'll leave that question there. I won't hide that one. I'll leave it there so we can come back to it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm so sorry about our technical glitches this evening, everyone. It's amazing modern technology that you can get people who are really spread out across the country all in the same room. But unfortunately, we've just got a few technical issues. But yeah, if we hold that question over for Enoch when we have the panel discussion, that'd be awesome. Cool. Any other questions, Di?
No, not at the moment. Thanks, Jen.
Awesome. Righto. As I said, pop them in and we can have a good chat about them at the end. Very good. Well, Julie has just really nicely touched on the importance that nutrition plays in setting up an AI program. And our next speaker, his name is Anthony Pearce, and he is a managing partner with Hills Farm Supplies. And Anthony is quite incredible. He wears many hats. He's a ruminant nutritionist. He has a passion for the seed stock industry, having both sheep and cattle seed stock production enterprises of his own. And he also does a bit of pasture agronomy, the whole works. And so he's given us a brief presentation tonight just on the importance of getting the basics right, and in that lead up, the things that you should be considering in that lead up to running an AI program. Unfortunately, Anthony isn't with us this evening, but if you are interested in anything that he has brought up tonight, please get in contact with me and I'll happily pass his details along. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Anthony. The next presenter I'd like to introduce is Anthony Pearce. Now, Anthony wears a number of hats, one of which being a nutritionist based down in Adelaide Hills in South Australia. He also has interests in seed stock production and so is really well placed to give us the brief for our next segment, which is understanding how nutrition can impact an AI program. So welcome tonight, Anthony. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom.
Great, thanks, Jen. When you ask me to do this, it's always a bit of fun doing something different, and this is my first time actually doing a webinar, and I do lots of presentations, but I'm still a face-to-face person, so this is it. And yes, you're right, our family has been running seed stock since 1964. I still run a Suffolk sheep stud and Brangus and Ultra Blacks, and the family business is that as well. So I have a real love for the cattle job and really sort of enjoy seeing, I guess, where Angus are at as a breed, and I'm pleased to hopefully contribute a little bit tonight to help the breed go further. So, look, Jen asked me to talk about understanding cow nutrition and how it can help shape a successful AI program. So hopefully tonight I'll give you an opportunity to think about a few things. I don't want to make it complex, but I want to make it clear and pointed as to what we want to do. So I guess, the nutritional elements, it's fairly basic. What can influence your AI success? It's energy, protein, fats, minerals, and vitamins. And it is a big brief. And I really want to focus on I guess what I see as being the key things. And that therefore comes down to what I really think is the elephant in the room. That is, what is the most important fundamental thing we have to get right? Everything else is an add to, but this is the bit that we need to get right. And that is energy. It's energy all the way. That's what the cow needs to survive on. That's what she sets herself up on. That's what she milks on. It's what she reproduces on. It's what she puts body fat on. And if we don't serve that need, we need to have a situation where the cow needs to have enough energy to be able to function, have her vital functions working. That is things like for organs and homeostasis, so keeping blood warm, just our normal, what we have to do to actually be here and be alive. Then she's going to milk. Then she's going to reproduce. She will prioritise that. If you don't have enough energy in the system, that cow will not cycle. She will protect herself. That is her role. Reproduction is lower in her priorities than looking after that calf, and that is milking. So we need to get to the point where we have enough excess energy in the system to do that. If you're not there, your AI success is going to be lower because those cows will not be willing to cycle. Simple stuff, but people overlook it. So, and when I say simple stuff, it's the same old problem. I've circled down the bottom. This table here was generated in 1962 through some trial work. And it was really just looking at pre and post calving energy levels and what effect that has on when a cow starts to cycle and her first conception rate. And if you look at it closely, it's a really simple table, but it's super clear that if we feed cows well pre and particularly post calving, our first conception rate's higher. And particularly in a situation, we get them cycling sooner. So it's still the same age-old problem. It is about managing body conditions. So when we look at this table here, clearly to me it says, what do we need to do to our cows? We need to make sure we are managing those cows well for adequate energy intake to meet their needs. So I've talked about energy, and in ruminants we talk about metabolizable energy, but I'm not going to make this any more complex than I have to. But how do we know we've got an energy problem or possibly a potential problem looming? And the things you're thinking about is, are you noticing or recording cows cycling in sufficient numbers? Are we seeing adequate cow cycling? Are the cows hungry? What does the cow require? How do we know that we're actually feeding our cows well enough? And predicting how much paddock feed is in front of our cows and how good it is. And if it's not, what access to forages, for example, do I have to be able to feed these cows and how good that's going to be? But the ultimate question is, are the cows losing, gaining or holding condition after calving? That last point is the real secret to accessing energy status. And how we do that through body condition scoring. But before we step into that, let's just think a little bit. Being a South Australian, I've used a winter dominant rainfall region. And if we were to carve our cows, in this case here, I've got two charts, one showing the cows themselves in terms of their yearly energy requirement, what they need at calving, mating, weaning. And then I've got one overlaying how a typical pasture curve works in South Australia or in New South Wales or southern regions, New South Wales, Victoria. And you can see here that if we were doing autumn calving herd, we actually we're unlikely to have enough pasture available to meet cows' needs. Their highest demand is when we have our lowest grass growth rates. So that doesn't mean that we should all be calving in spring if we look at this map. But what it does tell us is that what we need to be looking at is meeting a cow's energy need. If I haven't got adequate grass, what are my alternatives? So thinking ahead and thinking, if I'm doing an AI program, I need to feed these cows well enough. As a nutritionist, we jokingly call, the first thing you need to give them is vitamin F, food. Make sure you're giving them enough. In this situation here, if I looked at these charts, I would say to you, gee, where we're calving and how much grass we're likely to have, we're going to have a gap. What are we going to do to fill it? So let's go back to looking at these cows And I always say that the first and second calvers are the barometers of your herd. They're the ones that are most likely to lose weight first. The reason for that is that they have one more requirement than an adult cow. They have a requirement for growth. So a heifer at first calving should be around about 85% of mature cow weight. But over the next 2 years, she's got to fill that last 15% of growth. We expect that's generally 7% per year. So where an adult cow may be just losing and gaining body fat, these cows are still increasing in skeletal mass and muscle mass as they're growing. So the first part of the herd you can actually look at, if you want to know how your cattle are performing, look at the younger animals in the herd. Those females are the ones. And it's important, if we're doing an AI program, these younger animals should be where our better genetics sit. I want to make sure that they are cycling successfully. So I need to be feeding for them. It's easy to feed the adult cows, but we can let the younger generation slip back because we're not accounting for their growth. So what does body condition look like? I've chosen some Brahmins here. They're easy photos. This has come off of the MLA website. I don't want to talk too much about body condition themselves. There's Future Beef, MLA all have excellent tools to actually look at body condition. But all I want to do is just sort of show you, we'll quickly skip through these, just what they sort of look like. So obviously we have a score system in Australia of 1 to 5. In America, it's a 1 to 9 system. And if you're doing any Googling that, sometimes you'll learn that then the US system works to that. But ultimately, it's still working to the same principles about looking at how much body condition, so how much fat and how much muscle these cows actually carry at any point in time. So we really want to be at least here. We need to be at a condition score 3, and it describes it nicely about hip bones are faintly visible, ribs are usually not visible, tailhead is not recessed. So we're looking at fat deposits in the tailhead. So really looking at where fat gets laid and how much muscle mass is going on. If we jump back to 2, for example, and 1, when a cow isn't getting enough energy, she actually starts to take it back off her body. So she starts to reuse some of her muscle mass as an energy store. And you can see in a score 1 cow here, how we describe her as extremely lean thigh. Why? Because she is actually stripping it off of her body. So this is where we want to be, 3s and 4s. 5s, there are some other health issues that can come with being excessively fat in terms of depressed appetites and ketosis, but that's for another day and another discussion. So let's say, why is energy and hence body condition so important when we're talking about reproduction? And a nice little graph like this using the US 1 to 9 system shows that as we improve and we get to that ideal condition score of what we'd say in Australia is around about a 3, which is a 5 to 6 in the US, you can see how our reproductive success goes up. So again, it comes back down to that point. If we are actually serious about getting good AI results, we need to be serious about what body condition our cows are in, because we're increasing our chances of getting them in calf. Ag Victoria, their recommendations, that little read of this, and it was good. It said no lower than 2.5 at calving for autumn calvers and 2.5 for mating with autumn calvers and 2 for spring calvers. That all seems really good, and I thought that's excellent as a reference point. But the potential problem can be, with this as an AI program, is that we think our herd is an average of 2.5, but we could have a distribution whereby we still have a number of animals that are thin or under conditioned below that. So again, this little, I actually should say this is off my iPad. We do condition scoring for dairy cows, and this is a dairy cow system. But the graph's an excellent graph to give you a demonstration of just, we got our average right. We've got plenty of cows that are in good condition, but we have a bunch of cows here that you can see in the red that are actually still light. And we need to fix that. So our average is good, but our spread's too wide. You need to look at your cows and assess, are they all there? Not just some of them. And is the average good? You need to be looking at either end of the system. That's a key. So if we talk about what are we going to do with these under-conditioned or thin cows, what's the first steps we should be doing? How are we going to fix it? Because if you've got an AI program planned, what are we going to do to actually get those cows back on track? So simple things, and that's why I'm trying to keep it simple. You can do things like split the group, split them according to age and body condition score. Age, obviously, because we spoke about that growth requirement, and body condition score because it's an easy thing to split them on. Vary those feeding amounts accordingly so you can hold those cows in an adequate condition where they need to be, but we can feed the others more. Consider things like extra feeding post-weaning if you're planning way ahead, or weaning calves early if that's what's required. Weaning calves early actually brings cows back on heat. So ideally, we want to leave calves on there to 5 to 6 months, because we'll achieve about 80% of milk yield in that 5 to 6 months. So we get the most out of the cow and we get a good result with the calf. But if we need to get those cows cycling again and we're in a tough season, we may need to pull the trigger early to get those cows back and into what we describe as a positive energy balance or a rising plane of nutrition. Find your best feeds. Talk about that a little bit in a minute, because that is important. And make sure you have appropriate feed out facilities. No point thinking you're going to do something if you can't do it in terms of feed out facilities. So if there's no point feeding out silage as pit silage if you haven't got the right machinery to feed it out, for example. You need to be set up to do the right job for to get the right result. So very quickly, I don't want to get too much into agronomy, but cows eat grass and we need to be thinking about this. When are you doing your AI and at what stage is your pasture at? That's a key. More leaf, less stem, more quality. Simple rule. That's what we need to be looking for. So if we want to put weight on cattle, we need to be looking at where those best pastures are. Coupled with that, if I was cutting silage, for example, and I was cutting over a period of time or cutting hay, I want to know where my best hay is, and time of cutting has an influence on that. So the longer you leave it, the higher the lignin content, the higher the what we call neutral detergent fibre, which is the fibre component, the lower the energy intake and the lower the intake potential. Lower quality feed, less energy in the cow, means that we end up with that result where we don't get adequate energy to put weight on them. As I said at the start, it's about that elephant in the room. It's all about energy, so we need to find it. So if I was AIing cows and I felt that my body condition wasn't quite right, I'd be looking for my earliest cut silage or earliest cut hays that are nice and leafy that I'm able to feed, or I'd be looking through my pastures, looking for those pastures that are still holding really good leaf and adequate quantity with that quality. I did say before, feed out and storage methods. You know, you really got to be aware of little other hidden things. If your silage or hay isn't well managed, there's risks of mycotoxins, which are molds and things like that. They can have an influence on conception rates, early embryonic loss and things like that. How we feed out obviously has an influence in terms of how much wastage we get, and that's a cost in itself, but it also means that we think we're delivering enough feed, but the cows aren't consuming it. And lastly, do the cows actually want to eat it? We need it to be palatable. If we want to get energy into the system, we've got to get the cows to actually eat it. So you've really got to be mindful of what you've got in reserve if we need to fix the problem, but also, you know, how we're going to get the best results. So that is, how do we make sure we're still feeding them as well as we can? Now we'll talk about the other stuff. There's always the other stuff. We get bombarded with a lot of things like trace minerals, fats, vitamins, all those key things that can actually and do actually provide benefits to animals. There's no doubt about it. The results are there. You know, they come in forms of injectables. They come in forms of boluses, loose minerals. They're excellent, but I don't want to make them a priority over the key element of energy. These are the things we tidy up once we've addressed that first. So again, I'll reiterate that. Address energy first, then we start coming towards these types of things. So today, all I've done is really look at just some of the key elements to consider, and they are copper, cobalt, zinc, selenium, manganese. They're the 5 that I've picked out. Another vitamin that we often look at is vitamin E, and we can also consider in the right situations the addition of feeding fats as a very energy-dense source. But let's have a look at what these actually do. So yeah, they're quite significant in terms of their effect, but you have to remember you have to have a deficiency to get the result. There are some work that's been done that does show that there is either a superoxide effect or an additive effect that some of these minerals can present, which is a bonus. But again, we're just putting it into perspective and saying, okay, as a starting point, it's energy, and then it's these. So you look at copper, for example, and copper plays a significant role in things like delayed estrus, embryonic death, decreased conception, delayed puberty. We can talk about that in a minute about heifers, and decreased ovulation. So, you know, decreased ovulation and delayed estrus, they're important things when we're doing fixed time AI and things like that, and we're trying to get the timing right. So we don't want to get those things wrong. Zinc, abnormal estruses. Well, that's really important too, because obviously we want cows to be cycling in a regular pattern and be, you know, receptive. So if, again, these are the things that we need to sort of be addressing, but in a measured way. Selenium, not so direct in terms of the actual point of AI, but of course the point of retains placentas and the ability to repair tissue is key, and that allows that uterus, for example, to involute and repair itself, and the cow to prepare herself for the breeding season. So that's where things like vitamin E plays a role alongside selenium in that situation. And lastly, things like manganese. We talk about things like silent heats, which is really an increase in estrus. We're not seeing cows cycle normally, and we're not picking them up. So that's they're the 5 that we look at. Or the last one I guess I should mention is cobalt. Cobalt's very indirect. Cobalt really is all about producing vitamin B12, and vitamin B12's role is improving fibre fermentation in the rumen. More fibre fermentation effectively means we yield more energy from whatever feed they consume. So cobalt is really about just simply helping improve energy yield from feed. So there is a relationship there with saying, here's another way to get more energy, but the other minerals all play a more direct role in fertility. So what would I be doing in that area? Well, first of all, I'd be identifying and addressing, do I really have a problem? So there's ways about that. We can blood sample, we can tissue test, we can soil test, we can use available expertise, because often it's historical data and knowledge of local areas. But as I said, let's get what you want to do is establish a good base data and then work from there, rather than just blindly accept that you need all those minerals, because overdosing can be as detrimental as having a deficiency. So excesses aren't ideal either. But lastly, like I said, blocks, loose mineral formulations, injectables, boluses, there is plenty of options on the market if you need to address these issues. So running into the last little bit, and I couldn't help myself but put one nice photo of a black animal. It may not be an Angus, but it has Angus in its name, so we'll leave it at that. What I was going to say, AI and heifers, this is your latest genetics. These are the replacements in the herd. Don't neglect them if you're thinking of AI. You really need to still be focused on, they need to reach that puberty at around about 12 months of age. The reason for that is that we need at least 2, but ideally on multiple cycles before they are AI'd, or before they are bred. Because the reason for that is that first cycle is particularly low in conception rate, and the more cycles she has, the more receptive she becomes. So that's the key to that. Secondly, we do need to have that heifer sitting at 50 to 60% of mature cow weight, and ideally closer to 60 at 14 to 15 months of age. What does that roughly mean? She's a condition score 3. She's going to have about 5 millimetres of fat over the last 2 ribs, and she's going to carry about 18 to 20% of her body weight in fat. That's where she's going to be at that age, and that's when she's ideal. So she's ready to breed. We get her pregnant, and then we continue to grow her out to being a 2-year-old at 85% of her mature weight. Again, it's worth focusing on this. If you neglect your heifers, we need to get them bred back within a 70 to 80-day period post-calving. Now, if we're going back into an AI program again, I've got to make sure that she's in adequate body condition. And again, she's still got that growth requirement. So it's really, really paramount that when you're thinking about the whole AI program, and often we're basing it on cows, that we've got these heifers coming through the system as yearlings that we need to be looking at as well, and thinking, okay, I need to keep an eye on them at the same time as I'm managing my cow herd, because they are going to become cows in 12 months' time, and I do want them to stay in the herd and continue to be rebred successfully. So they need to be growing out sufficiently to do that. So in summary, it's really 3 things: know your property, know your cows, and who can I talk to. If I was summarising what I've said today, it is absolutely about where is the energy on the farm. So we need to understand where there is paddock feed, where there is good conserved feeds, and how can I feed it? What grows when? So matching your requirements to when you have feed available, or if you don't, how are you going to conserve that feed? What are your management options? How is your farm set up? What are your abilities? What sort of facilities do you have? All these things influence your ability to be able to set the cows up for an AI program, because they all influence how well you can feed them. And last in that area, what are the known mineral deficiencies or excesses within your property? So cows, know your requirements. When do they need to be fed? Think about things like, as we discussed, the age of those cows or the heifers. When are you calving? And being really, I guess, across your body condition scores, being able to look at your cows and say, yes, they are in good condition. They are looking well. They're looking bloomy. We've got some fat cover on them. They've got some muscle mass. They're looking like they're well animals. And lastly, if you do need advice, find some reliable people you can talk to with outside expertise and get their assistance. Find some trusted advisors and work with them, because it's only going to benefit you, because you will get better results as a result of doing that. So hopefully tonight I've given you a few things to think about and some things to take away, I guess, and either investigate or look at the way that you can, improve your AI program or make a start in it. So for any of you who are starting out the Angus breed, I wish you all the best, and hopefully you have a long and prosperous time breeding Angus cattle. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Anthony. As I said, Anthony's not here this evening, but he is really a guru of sort of like these holistic solutions, and he's really touched on some of the stuff that both Enoch and Julie have touched on as well. So I hope you guys have got some value out of that. And I'm sorry, we are running a little over time. One of the things that I was meant to say at the head of this webinar was a heap of the extension activities we do are sort of powered by, your opinion, which is why we do this polling during these events, to get a sense of, is this information relevant to you, the way it's delivered, all that sort of thing, just to make sure it's lending value to your operations. So Di's just very kindly put up a poll. If you guys wouldn't mind participating in it, that would be so helpful. It's 4 questions. If you wouldn't mind just smashing them out, we'd be insanely grateful for that. So our next thing is just if you have time and are willing to stay around, you have both Enoch and Julie still on hand to ask questions of. Di, do we want to touch back on the motility and morphology question that was asked earlier? Enoch, if you don't mind coming back online.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, and I've also enabled your video, so you can turn on your video if you want.
Oh, yeah, let me turn the light on.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Howdy. Is that working?
It is. Good to see you.
All right, do you want me to read the
I can't see
question out?
me, so I'm not sure if I got a booger in my nose or anything. You guys can let me know.
No, you're all good.
I think it was a question about when you procure semen, whether or not it's been assessed for motility and morphology. Absolutely. So when we collect a fair few bulls here, me and another group of veterinarians. So when we collect the fresh sample, we work out the motility, and that's factored in on how far we extend that semen. And then when you freeze it, some bulls freeze better than others. There's a lot of things at play there, and but generally speaking, you'll knock the tails off about half of them. You'll knock your motility in half. Some bulls do better. Some bull motility assessment, and then we'll do what we call a bench test, where we see how long it'll continue to swim. And also, before I collect the bull, I'll collect morphology samples, just because I don't want to make a bunch of straws and then have to chuck them. And when we thaw them, we'll send them away to a third party. So for ABS, we collect for them a bit. They go to Peter Chenoweth. I send a fair bit of stuff to Just Jeans, Joan Cooper and Colette, or to Tracy Sullivan up in Broome. And there's lots of great morphologists, and so they'll look at those straws, and they'll conduct another morphology test on that semen as well to confirm that on the day the morphology was acceptable. Now, if you're buying custom semen, or someone's collected it and it's been put together, it really depends on the person who's paying the provider and is going to be looked at. And to go back to Julie's comment, just because semen was made properly, you want to make sure it was handled properly. So it's always handy to hang on to at least a couple of straws to look back on if things don't go as you'd hoped. Or sometimes if I'm worried, I'll even crack a straw before a program and just check it out.
Cool, good advice. Probably another good example of why you get someone who, like technician wise, because they're able to do that. Yeah, cool. Do we have any?
And if we're doing fresh semen, we'll warm it back up and make sure that the motility is maintaining the threshold we need.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions for Enoch and Julie? As I said, just pop them in the Q&A section or throw up your hand. As I said, these guys are real powerhouses of AI and animal health in general. So don't let your opportunity go to waste.
Yeah.
Enoch, I know that you've got a couple of other PDSs on the go at the moment. What have you got on? What are you guys investigating as your A-sheep group?
We do, yeah. Yes, on the back of the success of our integrating fixed time AI and commercial life mating program, PDS, we've got lots of other programs going for pasture and also some sheep programs. But on the cattle side of things, we've got 4 of them up. One is to try to get someone from over east to come and help us do some carbon benchmarking, because we're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Another one is to look at the time of weaning. And so in that PDS, we're going to try to get producers to nominate to be involved. They're going to nominate when they intend to wean, and then they're going to go in and wean half the calves 2 months early. We'll wet dry the cows at that point, then wet dry them again at the second weaning. We'll then weigh the cows and body condition score, but the weight will be a better indicator of the effect of removing the calf from them without being as subjective. And then we'll weigh the calves themselves, and then we'll re-weigh them later on after they've been backgrounded and see what sort of compensatory change we see. And what we were trying to show to folks is it's pretty inefficient to feed a cow milk to produce, feed a cow grass to produce milk for a calf. That doesn't really cool. We're also doing another one on bovine herpes viruses and infectious planopocyte any vet ever made up, which I call exploding dick syndrome. And it's this herpes virus that it seems to affect bulls in their first mating season and early in the joining, and they get ulcers on their willy, and they work so hard and they're loving their job so much that they get a bit of edema in their prepuce, and then they have a catastrophic failure. I don't want to go into too much detail there because it'll make all the blokes a bit squeamish. So what we're doing there is we're trying to trial a couple of different vaccine options. So we've got Bovillus MH plus IBR or RhinoGuard, which is an intranasally applied modified live product, typically used in the feedlot. We've been doing that in Esperance for about 15 years. What we're trying to do is actually capture some data so we can share it with the rest of Australia to show that it is going to be beneficial to reduce the likelihood of breakdown in bulls in their first season. And the last one is bovine pesty virus, is to try to get producers to blood test a handful of their heifers prior to mating. And if they're immune, we're going to try to encourage them to ear notch and remove all the PIs. If they're not immune prior to mating, we're going to try. So those that had immunity prior to joining and chose to either ear notch or not, meaning do nothing, and those that are seronegative and chose to either vaccinate or do nothing. So you got 4 groups there. We'll track their performance as far as pregnancy rate, weaner throughput, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we're having fun down here. We got lots of good stuff we're doing. We just want to share with the world. And if you're doing something special where you're at, if you don't have a producer group, freaking make one. Get amongst it. Have some fun. This MLA PDS program is just rad as hell, and it just gives you an opportunity to share things with the world. It's a great platform.
Enoch is a big advocate, and I have to say, I hope that like that fixed time AI data that we saw this afternoon probably illustrates that, just how powerful some of these, like, although a little group based in and around Esperance have created a really awesome data set that has been presented all over Australia, I'm certain of. I'm not sure about all over the world, Enoch. I'll leave that in your hands, I'm sure.
I'll keep my mouth open.
Very good. Di, have we had any other questions? I am conscious that we've been running for some time now, so if there are no other questions, we might wrap up.
No, not at this point in time. Thanks, Jen.
Beauty. Righto. Well, Julie, Enoch, thank you so much for coming and lending your vast knowledge base to us. I'm sure I speak for the rest of everyone else, just saying thank you so much. Yeah, it's just that practical boots on the ground, bit of scientific data and some serious hardcore animal health protocols is just the perfect mix. And I will also say thank you to Anthony as well. Yeah, he's a bit of a guru, and I think we've been very lucky to have him on tonight. So thank you very much, guys, and yeah, have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having us on board.
No, the honour's all ours.
See you guys.
This session will be
Thanks, guys.
and will be available Cool, sorry. Will be available online. So if you've missed it or think someone will benefit from it that you want to flick the link to, just hit up Angus Australia. Awesome. Well, take care, everyone, and thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the 29th of September.